2, 1. Wait for the message, Dawn.
Okay. Okay, can I just welcome everyone to the this first joint meeting of two scrutiny committees, Economy and Place and Children's Scrutiny Committee, doing some scrutiny work around skills in itself. Before we officially start proceeding with the business of the night, we need to elect a chair and then a vice chair, just in case we have any dropouts in terms of internet functionality. So could I please receive nominations for a chair for the meeting for tonight?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Baker, please.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Yes, Councillor Fenton. Yep. Okay. Will there be any other nominations? No. Okay. Can I see a show of hands for Councillor Baker in the chair, please? Yeah, that's a clear majority. Thank you. So Councillor Baker will be in the chair. Councillor Baker, do you want me to proceed to do an election of vice chair, or would you like to do it when you assume the chair?
Well, yes, I can do it. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Dawn.
Fine.
Okay, well, shall I get going then? I think that was that part done. All right, so I would like to nominate Councillor Kilbane to be vice chair, unless there are any other nominations.
No.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Douglas.
Seconded.
Oh, you're seconding it. That's brilliant. Thank you. Right, so could I have a show of hands for appointing Councillor Kilbane as vice chair this evening? Brilliant. Okay, that looks good. If Councillor Kilbane's happy. Brilliant. Okay, welcome everybody. And Dawn introduced the name of this committee tonight. It's the Joint Commission Scrutiny of Children's Education and Communities Committee with Economy and Place Committee. Before we talk about what's on the agenda, could I ask if anybody has any declaration of interest at all for any of the items?
Hello. Just want to put on record that I am an apprentice.
Oh, sorry, that was Councillor.
I think the chair keeps muting herself there, but I did have a declaration of interest.
Okay,
I don't know how we describe it, but as a teacher, I will no doubt have worked with some of the people that we're talking about tonight, and obviously my own school is mentioned at one point, and it is always right that councillors declare their interests. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Webb and Councillor Pearson. Sorry for the unintended muting. Okay, and so to introduce the topics for tonight, it goes without saying that both committees represented here tonight felt a real pressing need to hold a meeting with the broad title of skills, and of course employment, the issues to do with rising unemployment, real worries about a lost generation of young people going forward, reskilling, job creation. All of these things are needed on a massive scale now, not least because of the impacts of the pandemic, but also because of the need to decarbonise our economy. And so therefore, we're welcoming tonight the setting up of a new citywide partnership. That was one of the reasons we wanted to hold a meeting, is to hear about the new Skills and Employment Board, and also for members tonight to have an opportunity to contribute to the strategies that we're going to hear talked about in item 5. So to start with, however, we have got 2 reports that give background and context on specific areas of concern, which both Children's and Education and Economy and Place brought forward as particular areas of concern. And I have no notifications of any public participation, I'm afraid, tonight. So hopefully there are other people watching this evening, and it will be it is webcast, live webcast. And we will begin with item number 3, therefore, which is the update reports from from Steve Flatley, and Wendy is our guest as well here, Wendy Mangum from the Department of Work and Pensions. They have an update on NEET, which are the 16 to 25-year-olds not in education, employment or training. So I would very much like to welcome Stephen and Wendy to talk to us about their report. I can't see them. Okay, where's Steve? There we go. When you're ready.
Okay, Chair, what would you like me to do? Would you just like me to provide a summary of the paper and then there's an opportunity for people to ask questions?
Well, yes, if you wouldn't mind, if you were prepared to do that.
Okay, happy to do so. So this paper, it updates the Scrutiny Committee on work of the local authority and its partners to support young people aged 16 to 18 into education, employment and training in line with the local authority statutory responsibilities, which extend up to young people age 18 and up to 25 for young people who have special educational needs and education and healthcare plans. So the paper outlines the measures taken by schools, colleges, the local authority, post-16 providers, partners and practitioners to support young people in full-time education and training, particularly during this really difficult time during the pandemic. And the paper also provides data on the significant increase in youth unemployment for young people aged 16 to 24 since March 2020. And Wendy will be able to outline some of the measures taken by the Department of Work and Pensions to support young people in the City of York. So the local authority does have statutory responsibilities, which I've outlined in sections 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we also have a specific responsibility called the September Guarantee, where we report every year to the Department for Education on the numbers of young people who've received offers of education from post-16 providers. We did really well this year, slightly down on last year, with 96.8% of young people aged 16 and 17 receiving a suitable offer of education. And we're doing well compared to the situation nationally and locally, and we're in the second quintile of local authorities. So we have above average performance in relation to our ability to offer young people places in education, employment and training. We have a cohort every year of around about 1800 to 1900 young people, year 11 leavers, which varies year on year. From sections 10 to 15, I've outlined the range of teams that work with young people, including schools, colleges, learning and work advisors, specialist careers advisors who work with young people with education and healthcare plans. And these partners come together regularly to form a NEET delivery group, which oversees work in this area. And also in the pastors, it looks at where the pressures are in young people. It looks at what young people encounter in terms of why they drop out of post-16 provision. We look at support for vulnerable young people, and over time we have worked together to put in support for young people, whether it be specific courses that young people can go on at post-16 to help them to access level 2 and level 3 qualifications later. And there are a couple of examples of that which I will come to later. So again, we compare favourably nationally, regionally and against statistical neighbours in relation to NEET performance. And I think we've done particularly well this year because young people have experienced a lot of barriers, a lot of disruptions to their education and a lot of disruptions to their transition from leaving year 11 into post-16 education as well. So we've had to work really hard on that. As a city, the partnership has worked really hard. Section 19 shows, and Table 1 shows that we have 55 young people aged 16 and 17, did show that we had young people who were NEET. That number has now gone up to 64, the latest data shows. But that just shows you the distribution by ward, and reflects some of the disadvantage in some of our wards as well, which we regularly see, and is replicated for other areas that the local authority works with local people on as well. We've also broken down NEET by schools as well, and that shows some good progress, particularly with schools like York High, for instance, which have no Year 11 leavers who are NEET. So that reflects really good transition arrangements, including the work of the Learning and Work Advisor in the school, working with the careers departments, but also some really close collaboration with York College, which is also replicated by other 11 to 16 schools as well. Young people who have education healthcare plans up to age 25, the rate of NEET for those young people is around about 8.8% compared to less than 2% for the whole cohort. So obviously, you know, there are still some challenges supporting disabled young people. They are four times more likely than the cohort to be NEET, but we have made some good progress, particularly in placing young people into supported internships and helping young people to continue with their education. But there is an issue. The table in Annex 1 shows that young people disabled young people do tend to drop out after age 20. Excuse me. Quite often when they leave full-time provision. The paper outlines the experiences of young people, how they are managing with what we call blended provision, which is a mixture of coming into the centres and receiving online learning. There are some stories that you can see there, up to paragraph 26. Annex 2 shows the numbers of young people in care and care leavers, and how the numbers who are NEET in York compares nationally and regionally, and some good areas of progress, including the numbers of young people going into higher education, which is a really good story. We have small numbers of young offenders who are NEET, 2 since were last recorded. And also you can see how schools have come together with the colleges to support young people in this difficult transition from sections 29 onwards. And whilst it did show young people moving courses when they arrived in post-16 provision, the stay-on rate is pleasing, and it's also showing that more young people are opting to go to university rather than take a year of employment, and that's probably because there aren't too many opportunities in the York economy at the moment for them. There's also some information from section 34 onwards about some work between our schools and the college to put in some non-GCSE vocational pathways for young people. We were hoping to do this in January this year. However, it's now been delayed to September 2021, partly to do with capacity issues at York College having to support young people to complete their apprenticeships. So that was recently something that was recently announced by John Thompson after talking to heads. But hopefully that will go ahead later this year. In terms of from section 36, support for vulnerable young people, York Learning has an excellent program called Routes to Success, Section 37 highlights how many young people are on the programme. York College also has discrete provision called the Parish, which is demonstrating good outcomes for young people who go into this provision. The provision there is working well with good engagements despite the challenges that we've had, and retention has improved. And some really good engagement with English and maths this year as well. We were wondering about how that would fare, but a lot of the students are reporting good engagement because they're feeling the benefits of one-to-one tutoring, even if it's online. We've had a late start offer, which happens at the college for young people who switch courses. Again, I think that's going to be delayed until after the February half term. We also talk about European Social Fund provision, which supports young people pre and post 16. So we've given you some information in sections 46. There about 45 and 46 about the numbers involved there. And section 50 gives you some of the outcomes that have been achieved through the European social funding. Apprenticeships, due to the economic shock, we're still trying to assess what is actually happening in terms of how it's affecting young people in apprenticeships. And I know that you're going to get some more information from Alison later. As far as young people's entry into apprenticeships from year 11 is concerned, it's only very slightly down. At the time of the report, there were 67, but 70 young people have gone into apprenticeships this year, and that compares to 90 last year. So the numbers of young people age year 11 going into apprenticeships has held up pretty well compared to last year. But we still don't know for sure what the impact of the pandemic is going to be on young people completing their apprenticeships because of the impact on the local economy. As far as young people aged 16 to 24 is concerned, well, since March, there's been a concerning trebling of youth unemployment. In response, the Chancellor has responded to some measures, including the Kickstart programme, and Wendy from Job Centre Plus can talk to you about that. In the appendix that I've provided, in Appendix 3 and 4, it gives you the youth unemployment data, and it also gives you some of the measures that are happening here in York to support young people in that particular age group. So I think in conclusion, there is an effective partnership in the City of York. Yes, we do have some challenges. I think it is a contrasting picture in terms of supporting young people through the local authorities' statutory responsibilities to support young people up to age 18. But I think there are further challenges for those young people who would wish to go into the labour market age 18 because of the situation with the local economy and how it's been impacted by the pandemic. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephen, for the summary and highlighting key paragraphs there. I just want to check with Wendy whether there was anything she wanted to add about the either Kickstart or the older age group before we go into questions. Did you want to highlight anything, Wendy, or should we wait for members to ask questions specifically?
No, I can highlight some of the provision we offer, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so obviously it's a government priority is to get young people into work because they've been severely affected by the pandemic. So doing this through the government help for jobs. Massive priority at the moment is Kickstart, as Steve mentioned. So this started in September with the first placements for young people in November. So Kickstart, they're high quality paid 6-month work placements for 16 to 24-year-olds. They have started off the government with 18 to 24-year-olds that are on universal credit just for ease of getting numbers through the system, and then they're going to widen it and look at getting the 16 and 17-year-olds more onto the system. So these are work placements that are over and above an employer's normal recruitment. You know, it's not displacing anyone else's jobs. We've had some really fantastic opportunities coming on board with Porter Cabin in York, LNER, Aviva, lots of different opportunities. There's also a wraparound employability support comes along with that 6 months job placement to help with CVs, mentoring, interview skills. So the placements are for 25 hours a week, and the government pay the wages at the national minimum wage for those 6 months. Employers, though, are topping up the wages. We're seeing some employers are topping up the wages, which they're allowed to do, and actually increasing the hours as well. We've also got a lot of interest from schools actually taking on Kickstart placements. Obviously, schools with the virtual teaching. We've got a lot of graduates at the moment at the job centre. We haven't had any graduates for years. We've got a big cohort of graduates at the moment who lack work experience. So a lot of them are going into the schools as teaching assistants, mentoring after school club. But then we've also got art technicians, PE teacher, assistants, gardeners, admin. There's a lot of different areas. So I was in a meeting today, and there's actually 100,000 approved vacancies going through the system at the moment. So that what that means is they've been approved, that they're legitimate and financially stable. They're just waiting now to go on the universal credit system for our work coaches to show those opportunities to the young people. And they anticipate that in the coming year there'll be 250,000 young people actually going through Kickstart placements, which is fantastic. So that's the big thing at the moment, Kickstart. We've also now got a Kickstart district account manager. So obviously you can imagine how many different queries and questions have come through this because it's a new scheme. So now we've got a district manager, we've got a district team who can answer those questions, and they're account managing the employers as they go through the system, which is making it a lot more seamless for the employer. So that's Kickstart. I just wanted to mention some of the things we do that have been very successful. We do mentoring circles. So these are employer-led sessions. Normally, before COVID, it was 3 sessions led by the employer. The first with a group of people, young people who maybe lack confidence. So the first session, the employer would talk through what their journey's been, their career path, what their company looks for in a young person, maybe talk to each of the young people about what their lack of confidence is around. Then they talk about what the company looks for in a CV, where they will look at the young people's CVs, talk about interview skills, talk about social media using LinkedIn. So it varies depending on what the employer wants and who the young people are in the group. And then the third session is mock interviews by the employer. So we've done this with Nestle, we've done it with NG, we've done it with a lot of the hospitality employers in York. Next week we're doing it with Aviva, and they've been fantastic the way they build up that group of young people's confidence. You really see a change over the 3 sessions. So we're running those virtually at the moment because that's just the way it is at the moment. So that's mentoring circles. Movement to work, that's work experience in the job centre to help young people 18 to 30. So it's giving them meaningful work experience. They help customers on the customer computers. We might ask them to do a project, to talk to staff at the end of their 4-week placement. Again, that's running virtually at the moment. And then we've got the youth. Hello?
Sorry, I was just going to ask you to, we've got quite a few questions that we'd like to ask. So there's going to be quite a few specific questions. But was it just the last sentence you wanted to say, the youth?
Oh, the youth hub.
Brilliant.
Yeah, this actually launches next week. We've had to do it virtually. So it's going to be a co-located and co-delivered centre for young people. So we are working with Future Goals, National Career Service, Prince's Trust, Aspire iGen. So it's tailored support for young people in one place to meet skill gaps. So it's probably aimed at young people who are motivated but might lack the skills and work experience. And around that, we've got a youth hub work coach who will work with the young people as to what the best route way is. And then we've also just taken on a youth employability coach. So that's someone who flexibly supports young people with complex needs and barriers to help them into work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. They all sound really positive. And like I said, we will move on to specific questions which perhaps you or Steve or one of the other council officers might be able to answer for us. So Councillor Taylor, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a general comment and a very specific question. So shall I just run the two together?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Thanks. I'd like to thank Steve for the report. It makes very interesting reading. And I think I'd therefore fully agree with the conclusions that you come to in paragraphs 70 to 72. The numbers of young people who are not in education, employment or training in York are therefore very low, statistically low compared to our near neighbours. And it seems therefore that the education and training providers here have responded very well. The real and ongoing problem is to do with the wider economy, because the question is whether there will be jobs available for these young people and indeed older people, as the economy remains very threatened by the ongoing pandemic. And we perhaps therefore need to redouble our efforts in the city to focus on apprenticeships, entrepreneurialism, and job retention and job creation. So we're going to come on to some of that in the latter part of the meeting. So I'll leave it at that in terms of a comment. My specific question was regarding the references to the European Social Fund, which came up a couple of times in the paper. Is it becoming clear now how the governments might continue the support that has been made available so far through the ESF? How will a UK shared prosperity fund might work? Does anyone have the answer to that question?
Simon Brereton, yes, please.
I can give you an answer to that, Councillor Taylor. The answer is that consultation is just beginning on what a UK shared prosperity fund might look like. It is one of those work streams, I think, that has been put partly on hold, unfortunately, throughout the pandemic. So I don't think we're much further advanced than we were a year or two ago in discussions around that. But I know there's a consultation meeting happening through Leeds City Region around that in the next couple of weeks. I say it's around designing what it might look like rather than the detail of what will be there in due course. Of course, that scheme that we're part of comes to an end at the end of next calendar year, so the end of 2023, and the projects that we have at the moment are in the process of running down.
Yes, I understand that. Thank you. So let's hope they get their act together before the end of next year.
Okay, thanks for that question. So it was Councillor Fitzpatrick next, please.
Rosie, just excuse me
Hello.
a minute. Councillor Douglas, I think, is wanting to ask a supplementary to that.
Oh, supplementary. Yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, good point. Thanks a lot. Go on, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm glad Councillor Taylor brought up the European Structural Fund. We've got our apprenticeship hub that's funded via that, and I understand that funding is coming to an end at the end of December this year, and I'm just wondering if somebody can outline what are the plans beyond December to make sure that we maintain that employer input with the apprenticeship hub. Thank you.
If I do the first part, just to say, so Alison Easton, Skills Team Manager, just to say that the ESIF programme Future Goals has been referred to, but it's also the Leeds City Region Employment Hub programme is funded until December 2021 with wrap up to March 2022. We align that with our impartial apprenticeship hub offer that was in place prior to that programme, but the business engagement resource that's directly working on the apprenticeship agenda at the moment is funded from that programme and will cease December 2021. As it stands, there isn't anything in the local budget for that business engagement resource.
Maxine Squire, Assistant Director, Education and Skills. As Alison said, we have a post which is funded using the ESIF funding around business engagement. What I would say though is that the work that the council does on apprenticeships is funded separately from that. So it is just this one post, and we do have an apprenticeship resource within our HR function as well. So apprenticeships within the council will continue to be supported. It is just this business engagement post which is separately funded.
Thank you, Maxine and Alison. Right, can we move on to Councillor Fitzpatrick's question?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just want to say something to start with. I'm really pleased, Steve, that we've got this here at last, the NEET's documents, because initially it came up at the Human Rights Board, as you know, and Councillor Baker and I both there. And I just felt it was so important, really, that we needed to have it through a scrutiny route. And I'm very glad that we are where we are now in a joint scrutiny, because clearly we do need to have economy in place here as well as we have. And I suppose the reason why I felt it was so important to scrutinise it was the comment in 72 that we have referred to about the trebling of unemployment since March. And I have to say, when I did the shadow role that Councillor Webb now does beforehand, I very much appreciated the work that was being done in places like the parish, for example. Can I just ask you what we know about that now, or is that fallen foul of everybody working from home? Do we know how they're doing? Are they still operating? Or are they still in touch with those young people?
They're still face to face, aren't they?
Yes. No, well, they're offering some blended learning as well, but yes, it's still functioning and they're supporting the young people well.
Yeah, and we have expanded the number of places in the parish provision as well, Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Good, because it was excellent what was going on there. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next was a question from Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Wendy and Steve, for a really interesting and comprehensive report. Just a couple of questions, if I may. On page 5, table 1, which sets out the ward by ward breakdown of figures of young people not in education, employment or training between year 12 and 13, I think with a few exceptions, there are clearly more NEETs in the year 13 bracket than the year 12. Does that, I suppose, just wanting to sort of better understand, is that a case of some placements or education opportunities that were put in place for the younger age group then coming to an end, meaning that there then aren't opportunities for those young people to access, or there are difficulties in sustaining what opportunities have been put in place immediately after leaving full-time education? So it'd be helpful just to any comment really on what the sort of sustainability challenge is for the younger age group as they get older. And then secondly, paragraph 23 talks about post-16 education and some challenges around access to equipment, laptops, tablets, etc. Obviously, it's an issue that there's been some national coverage about laptops to schools, but perhaps less attention on the need for access to equipment for those in post-16 education. So I wondered whether there was any national scheme for that cohort, similar to the what's been reported around equipment that's being made available to schools. Any insight into that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Does
Shall I?
Stephen have a comment?
Chair?
Yes, please.
Councillor Fenton, I'm going to have to get back to you about the laptops for post-16. I'm I'm not entirely sure what's happening there in terms of any improvements or any continued challenges around that. So I will try and get an answer back from you, particularly from the York College and Aston Bryan College. In terms of your first question about the numbers that drop out, there are a number of reasons why young people drop out and why the numbers look higher in year 13. Some of them, for some it's a continuation of being NEET from when they leave school. Unfortunately, there are small numbers of young people who we do struggle to get into provision when they leave school at 16. So some of them are still NEET 12 months on, although we do have lower numbers of young people who are NEET 6 months plus, and there is a continual churn in the system in terms of young people becoming NEET and then going into employment, and then some becoming NEET again. We do have a challenge with post-16 dropout though, after year 12, and some of it is because young people feel that they've made unsuitable choices and leave provision. Some young people finish level 1 provision and sometimes struggle to make the transition to level 2 or level 3 provision after that. And those are the main factors, but there's no, we tried to find particular courses where there might be trends, for instance, or particular job areas where young people struggle, and there's no discernible trend other than some young people are not able to progress to the next stage, and others leave because of lots of other issues like mental health issues and general health issues as well. And others decide to leave further education early and seek employment. And some of them are successful and some of them aren't. So there's no particular trend that I can point to, but there are a number of reasons, including increased dropouts. So you know, in line with the local authorities, we do have an issue in sustaining young people in post-16 provision.
Councillor Fenton, can I just pick up the question that you asked about laptops for children as well, post 16? If they are in sixth forms or colleges, then there is now the DFE scheme for disadvantaged young people to that the college can order a laptop for them in the way that schools can. The other thing is that prior to that, schools and colleges receive the 16 to 19 bursary fund, which is £1,200 per student, and that can be used to purchase laptops and tablets.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on, let's see, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I think firstly, thank you to the officers who've put this report together. It's very comprehensive, and also thank you to the officers for the work that you do day in, day out to really, you know, support our young people and get them where they need to be. I do think it's worth mentioning at this point that I did say this at the decision session for the budget that's coming up, but it is a real concern, particularly in the cuts in the children's budget there. Towards support for these young people, and I really hope that we can do something about that. My question is on, let me just get the right page, paragraph 37 and sort of the Routes to Success programme. Obviously on paragraph 37, I just want to sort of get a little bit more detail about sort of how this is funded, what the scheme's for. And then on paragraph 40, it says that the retention rates last year was 76%. And then a couple of paragraphs down, it says the average is about 80%. I was wondering if obviously it's a small cohort of people, but have we got any identifiable reasons for the dropout there? Obviously, you know, the course is quite successful, but the numbers are dropping out are significant in terms of proportions. So I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about that and really about the offer itself.
Hi, maybe I can help with that. My name's Angela Padfield. I'm the head of York Learning, the adult learning provider for City of York Council. The Roots programme works with some of the most excluded young people in the city. They have complex needs, complex emotional issues, and a variety of reasons why they've come to us. Quite a lot of referrals from colleges, Danesgate, charities, all sorts of places, sixth forms even. And they usually have a lot of life skills to learn, more than maybe the qualifications to learn. That's what we do. But they do have challenging lives, and that's the reason usually why we have dropout. So they either have to be excluded because their behaviour has become too much of an too wrong for the others to be in class with them, or they have been subjected, or I don't know, opened up to other forms that take them away from their learning. So that's usually why they don't achieve. They very rarely don't achieve if they've completed their learning. It's usually when they haven't and they've dropped out. The class size is usually between 20 and 30, but at the moment is 16 because of bubbles. And the most vulnerable learners we've actually kept in learning this time, because we can, otherwise we'll lose more of them, and they just need to be kept engaged. The other learners are doing it online, but that's the main reasons really. It's just that it's their life issues that are going on at the moment that tends to create that dropout, and actually we think we do really well with the challenges that they have.
Thanks, Angela. That's amazing that you're managing to maintain some face-to-face contact for the most vulnerable learners in this situation. So good on you, and keep safe. Was there a supplementary for Councillor Fenton?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. Where is the Roots programme delivered? Is it school or college based, or is it community based? It'd be interesting to see how the setting, is sort of tailored to meeting those sort of particular needs.
We were very fortunate, and we needed to be rehomed just over a year ago, and we've been really fortunate that council helped us secure new premises in Winterscale Street, which is, I can't think of the area, it's just gone from my head. Anyway, Winterscale House in Winterscale Street, just near the Mecca Bingo. And you helped equip it and sort it out for us, and it's a brilliant venue. It's designed specially for them. It's got nice small class sizes. It enables us to do that one-to-one work that's really essential. We've got breakout rooms so we can take them away and work with them individually when needed. Got an IT room, got laptops, that they've all taken home with them, so they're on loan at the moment, so they're not disadvantaged in any way in that form. But some of the vulnerable ones that we've got back in are the ones that can't be left digitally on their own. So that's one of the reasons why they're back in class for some of them, because they're vulnerable online.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you. Right, I'm going to move on to let Councillor Heaton have his question, and then we will see if we can squeeze in the other two, Councillor Webb and Councillor Douglas. I haven't forgotten you, but we'll need to finish this item off fairly soon. Councillor Heaton, have you got a new question?
I do. Just returning slightly to the issue of IT, if I may. So we said, and Councillor Fenton pointed out, it's been an ongoing issue, this, and it's noted in the papers. I mean, what's the current situation regarding figures that we can get of students not having access? Obviously, there's programs out there, but what the details of that?
Stephen, do you have any idea of what the numbers of, or Maxine, of children that digital inclusion might be an issue for? Stephen, you're muted. Thank you.
I don't at this stage. I don't have those numbers.
Okay, well, it would be useful to find out.
Yes.
We can discuss how that might work, and so get an answer to Councillor Heaton and the rest of us. Thank you. So Councillor Douglas, going back to you, you had an original question.
Would I be able just to come back very quickly, Chair?
Sure.
Sorry. Thank you. Just looking, we've obviously focused on IT equipment there, but obviously digital exclusion issues can also relate to internet access. It would be very useful if we get a sense there of how much is coming down to IT equipment, but also how much is coming down to internet access. And if we're gathering that information together, if I could put in a general request as well, if we could look at the communities that it's particularly hitting, if there are any patterns that we can gather from that as well in the data, where we can look to potentially target support as well.
We have asked for that information from schools, and we've had very little reported back to us in terms of problems with either access or equipment. Actually, it's been a handful of cases where that's been the issue. And as I say, schools now can order dongles for families via the DFE portal. And also the some of the main provider companies obviously are offering free SIM cards and have extended access that way.
Thank you.
And I could just say that I was working with a working group all through COVID that are doing the recycle scheme, and a lot of we managed to get some free devices, and we've been sharing out devices. And most of the young people I've worked with that are apprentices doing programs and have struggled, they've nearly all had data available. They've just not had a proper device to work on. So that seemed to be the biggest issue for them, was having a device that they could type on.
Great. So if there are any particular areas where, even those small numbers, if there are any particular areas where there's those digital issues, that could be quite revealing, I suppose.
Some of it is to do with the specification of the kit that they have, because obviously the colleges and the schools use particular platforms for their online learning, and some of the older devices don't allow access to them. So it's more the specification of what some of them have.
Good, thanks. That's really useful, and we'll try and get a bit more data on that issue where we can and help where we can. Councillor Douglas, would you like to ask your original question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a comment and then a question. I think it's for Wendy, really. So my comment around the numbers and data that we report and keep on NEETs in the council, I've always been concerned that the reported numbers are for 16, 17-year-olds who are in full-time education or expected to be already. But we actually know that this problem continues on through, as we've heard, to 24 or 25. And without having consistent reporting throughout that whole age period, it's really hard to track when young people start to fall out of the system, when they either leave training or fall out of employment. And I just think that as a council, we should really be looking to do a better job of reporting throughout the whole age period, and not just publicly giving that data for 16, 17-year-olds. Now, my question is for Wendy. I think it's about the Kickstart programme. And Wendy, I'm just wondering, internally at the City of York Council, can you tell me what participation there's been with the Kickstart programme and DWP, not in terms of organisation, but actually taking on Kickstart workers, young people? Thank you.
What, you're asking how many placements the council are offering?
Yes.
I don't know, to be honest. Do you know, Alison?
Sorry, just bring myself in there. On an update we've received earlier today, so through York Learning, we had proposed to support the uptake of Kickstarts, with them acting as a gateway intermediary organisation. But quite recently, just within the last, this week, last Monday, the government announced that actually businesses can go direct now and no longer need to come through a gateway organisation. if it transpires they haven't got 30 placements within their organisation. What this meant is whilst we were building up that employer interest, we weren't in a position to submit 30 initially. And since that announcement's come out, the opportunity to apply to become a gateway has closed in response to that announcement. So what we're actually doing is actively working with our business engagement officer, and Angela will confirm the role of York Learning, but they've already been very proactive at supporting those employers to either apply directly or find an alternative gateway that was already in place.
Thanks. Supplementary, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. And so, Alison, is that, am I clear then that we currently don't have any plans to employ any Kickstart young people in the council directly at this stage?
Not that I'm aware of, and that's more to do with the headcount and recruitment situation at the moment, as opposed to not wanting to support that wider agenda.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Webb, do you want to ask a final question before we move on to the next item?
I do, thank you. It's mainly about, so young people aged 16 to 24, paragraph 61. We get the data here. Up to August 31st shows 1,088 young people claiming job seekers allowance. This has increased from 338 in March 2020. That is quite a rise. And my question really is essentially, what are the numbers looking like now? How are they changing? What's the trends? Have we got any idea about a potential peak in that age group, or any detail around that? Thank you.
The latest alternative claimant counts just came out last week. Do you have those figures?
I have those figures.
Thank you, Simon.
The claimant count went up markedly in March and April and has remained pretty static since then. It's actually slightly declined last month, but that increase, which is actually, I mean, you've just seen it in terms of the 18 to 24 group. It's a pretty similar picture across all age groups, right up to 50 plus. So it's a consistent increase across the whole of York, and indeed across the whole of the country. If you look at the increase in York compared to other cities, and the Centre for Cities follow 63 cities around the UK, York has actually got the smallest increase of all of those cities, which is not to say that it's not significant, but in absolute numbers, while it looks it is clearly a very difficult position for those people who are not in work. Every other city in the country has it actually worse than York, so something just to bear in mind. But as I say, the figures increased at the beginning of the pandemic very markedly, but have remained remarkably static since then. In terms of where that might go longer term is a very good question, and you'll have seen that in my quarterly economic updates to Councillor Waller's decision sessions. We've been considering that as a figure for some time. It's linked very much to what happens at the end of the current furlough period, which currently runs to the end of March. I know in our regular updates with employers, I was on the phone this morning with the Federation of Small Businesses, the Chamber, the Institute of Directors, the BID, and other business networks. They're all very concerned about what might happen at the end of March. We currently have, well, the government hasn't released figures for York on furloughing recently, but something like 10,000 people furloughed in York at the moment. And the question is how many of those return to employment after the end of furloughing. We really don't know what the answer to that is, and it will vary very much from business to business and from sector to sector. But we do know that the sectors that have got most people furloughed are hospitality and retail. And obviously those are, well, they're big employers throughout the whole country, and they're particularly significant for York. So I say there's something like 10,000 people about that we don't know what's going to happen, unfortunately, until we really emerge from this pandemic. The figures at the moment, I say, look pretty bad, but if you can take any reassurance from the fact that actually every other city is doing worse, that is there. But I say it doesn't make the slightest bit of difference to those individuals who've lost their job, who obviously we all very much feel for, and we're working very hard with to make sure that they can find alternative employment.
Of course. Very quickly, please, Councillor Webb, because we do need to move on.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose my question really is, obviously this is affecting all age ranges in the job market, and there are only going to be a certain number of jobs that start to appear again, and it'll be a slow trickle, I imagine. Is this going to affect particular age groups more than particular other age groups over a longer period of time, do we think? Obviously in York, if it's retail and hospitality, you know, does that have a particular age profile, or yeah?
Do you want me to say something on that? I mean, that's quite a complicated question, which I'll try and avoid giving a 5-minute answer to. I'd say that a lot of the jobs that young people go into are not necessarily new jobs. They tend to be replacement jobs for people retiring, and that rate of people coming out of the labour market continues. And indeed, we are seeing particularly higher rise amongst older people in terms of worklessness. So that's something there. I'd say the statistics also show that the increase in unemployment has been worse for women than it has been for men. And there's a gendered aspect to this as well, which to me suggests it's also to do with part-time and full-time work. So there are lots of questions within that. I say I could give a 2-hour lecture on the topic, but I will avoid doing that.
Thank you very much. And to all members for their really interesting questions. I'm afraid we will have to leave that discussion there, but obviously going on to highly related, Alison again here has written the report updating us on the apprenticeship situation. So Alison, if you wouldn't mind keeping it fairly brief and just highlighting things from your report, and then we'll take questions specifically on apprenticeships. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the first thing to say, and Simon mentioned it there, is the impact on the take-up of apprenticeships is a national issue, like the economic situation, not just in York. And the key influences have been obviously the impact of lockdown on organisations of all sizes in those large employment sectors, but also on SMEs, and then the resilience and adaptability of our training providers. Not COVID specific, but also things that play in that market are the incentives for taking on a new apprentice, and they have been extended to the 31st of March, but also a backdrop of the reduction in availability of level 2 apprenticeships since the introduction of standards from frameworks. So again, these things were already in the mix. Specifically for York and the impact on COVID, you've got most of the detail there, section 6 to 13. What's hot off the press, and we had some updated information shared on Thursday from the national portal, albeit in a more or a less user-friendly version. For York, it's actually turned out to be a 27% reduction in apprenticeship starts. Now, this is for the apprenticeship year 1920. So that starts August 2019 and ran through to July 2020. So compared to the year prior, there's a 27% reduction. What we also received on Thursday and had a look at on Friday was Q1 of 2020-2021 provisional data. So that again, that runs from August last year to October. Now that actually shows around 200 fewer starts than the same period in the year before for York. And for under 19s, particularly relevant to the last discussion, we're actually down to about 90 starts for that period compared to 150 in the previous year. So what that's telling us is that quarter would normally have been the peak for recruitment activity. Therefore, this year won't necessarily be a year of recovery. We will do our utmost in support to promote apprenticeships, but actually the market is dictating what's happening. So for York, the large employment sectors Simon's mentioned, hospitality, retail and tourism, used to be around 30% of our annual apprenticeship starts. They've gone to nearly zero during the period of COVID. And again, the link there is to those entry-level roles, where a lot of our young people or people that want to work flexibly would have got a start, maybe through an apprenticeship. The good news, although it isn't to the same volume, large employers in York in other sectors are still recruiting to their successful apprenticeship programmes. So the likes of Nestle and Aviva are actually recruiting still at the moment. At the other end of the spectrum, obviously SMEs are focused on survival, and there is a 12-month minimum commitment for an apprenticeship. So even the incentive isn't enough to stimulate that market. Particularly as well, with Kickstart coming on stream, people are seeing them as comparable. Even though they're two different offers, they're saying actually a 6-month commitment with a salary pay is more attractive. Excuse me. But again, there's been some sectors where we've seen sustained recruitment or indeed a little bit of growth, and they're in those organisations that have continued to operate throughout the pandemic. So pharmacy, dental, early years and care. And if we move out to a sort of 15-mile radius of York, manufacturing and particularly food supply and logistics. In terms of resilience of training providers, we've touched on it already. Provision has moved from face-to-face to remote or blended when it was appropriate. Access to equipment has been an issue for some learners, but what we understand from our networks is that providers have looked after their learners themselves. What they've tried to focus on is minimising the breaks in learning and supporting those who have been affected by a break in learning, so particularly apprentices on furlough. And again, these are key focuses nationally for the ESFA. And then some independent training providers have also needed to put some of their own staff on furlough as small businesses themselves, particularly business development staff. So just to round up, it's really to say what the York Apprenticeship Hub through its partnerships and its network has been doing. And you'll see that in section 22 of the paper, the types of stakeholders that we continue to work with. But we're trying to understand that changing picture in York and the wider region. We're trying to make the most of emerging government policy. So we'll talk about the FE white paper next, but you can see the headlines for apprenticeships there in sections 18 to 21. We've constantly been supporting employers and residents to make the most of the apprenticeships with that informal levy brokerage. And section 15 does talk about a best practice sharing session that we held in December. And the key there is it was with other levy paying organisations present who either are struggling to transfer their levy or utilise it all in-house, or indeed haven't got a strategy in place for transfer and wanted to discuss how to do that. And then the final thing to end on, which is a nice thing, it's actually National Apprenticeship Week next week, starting the 8th of February. The theme is Build the Future. We're working with training providers, with the local enterprise partnership at York North Yorkshire to share a whole range of opportunities and resources that week. And we have our own Facebook Live event on Wednesday the 10th, 5 till 6 p.m, if you want to tune in.
Thank you very much, Alison. Okay, so let's move straight into questions. I think Councillor Douglas was first.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Alison, for that. And I'd also really like to thank your team, because I know the fantastic work that you do out there in City, often helping small businesses to get going in a very complex environment with apprenticeships, and also putting them in contact with experienced larger businesses. And this brings me back to a subject I mentioned earlier. I mean, the main person who does that, who actually facilitates getting new employers into the apprenticeship sphere, is that business engagement officer that you've already told us is coming to an end. The contract is coming to an end at the end of December 2021, and that officer is instrumental. I mean, can you explain to me what you think will happen beyond that point to this vital work?
I think there's a few things yet to actually determine in terms of the detail, but the opportunities are my substantive team will still be in place, and we do have colleagues within that who are very knowledgeable, well versed in apprenticeships. We are working very, very closely with the HR officer for apprenticeships that was appointed in January to actually really go hand in glove in terms of that external offer and the internal approach. And then we are waiting to hear about a North Yorkshire apprenticeship hub. That's a call went out some time ago from the LEP, and bids were being assessed, and actually about how we can work together as we already are. So those networks and those different fora that I mentioned, we actually, I keep using the phrase hand in glove, but that's true. We work like that with North Yorkshire LEP already. So actually, once we understand who's secured that bid and what that model looks like, we will be at that table and working together to make sure that York is very well served.
Can I just add to that briefly? And clearly business engagement is important for many things beyond apprenticeships as well. It's something that we've been working really hard on through the pandemic. Actually, our level of engagement has increased massively, and is something that continues to be a really important priority for us. So while we would very clearly miss a specialist officer working on that, and we hope that ways could be found to continue that post, I think it will be down to finding the right kind of external funding to do so, but there's still time for that to become available. We will be increasing and certainly keeping the level of engagement that we're doing, particularly with SMEs, much higher than it has been. We're really pleased to have been able to help the FSV to get over 1,000 members in York, and they do a huge amount in terms of helping us work with SMEs, and we're also working with the Chamber to increase Chamber membership as well. So while we would very much definitely miss the expertise that Bob or an equivalent person in that post brings, business engagement really is really important to us, and is something that we'll be doing everything we can to increase in all directions.
Thank you, Simon. I think Councillor Webb had a question next.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to sort of paragraph, the levy transfer, so paragraph sort of 14 through 17. Obviously, the council itself as an employer is paying into this apprenticeship levy, and as we know, if we don't, as it says in paragraph 17, unspent levy funds expire and go back down south to London at that point. And I was wondering if you could inform me. We had a council motion about this that was approved by council before Christmas about doing more to sort of retain our funds here. Could you give us an update figure on how much we're sending back each month, or how much we're spending each month? What's the proportions there?
I don't have the update figure to give. What we have agreed through working with the HR officer for apprenticeships is that we'll provide a quarterly update to Councillor Waller's decision session, so economy in place, and that next one is due in March.
Okay, so no one's got any idea of because obviously we were at one place. Can you tell me what the figure was? What the most recent figure is, sort of from before Christmas?
I've got the figure that was in the paper that you've just referenced, which is a past paper. That's the only figure that I'm aware of at the moment.
And what is that figure?
Sorry, I haven't got that paper in front of me.
Right.
I can pull it up though and clarify if that helps. Sorry.
No, that's fine. But it would be good to get some updates on that and where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Next is Councillor Fenton, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alison. I was just looking at the paragraph 18 onwards, and emerging government policy, and it sets out some bullets under some target dates. Just so I'm clear, is this what we expect government to be requiring those involved in the apprenticeship world to be doing? So is this guidance, or is this more a directive of government in terms of what their expectations are?
I understand. To be fair, it's probably a mixture of the two. So the headline bullets from the FE white paper that came out the same day we were finalising this paper, the specific developments under 21 were a mixture of what we knew from our conversations with the ESFA were being brought on stream as their priorities. So April 2021, large employers to support and hire redundant apprentices, supporting returns from breaks in learning and addressing problems around functional skills are ESFA priorities, so government priorities. In terms of August 2021, they are talking about the things that they will do to bring on stream, but obviously some of those will impact on us as an organisation and as an impartial facilitator. So we want to get in the front foot of those. For instance, bulk levy transfer is something that we want to be able to communicate and support locally for the local economy. And at the same time, our HR colleague will need to know what that looks like on the actual system. Does that answer your question?
And there's a supplementary question from Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Chair. This isn't really a question, it's more of a comment around the FE white paper. I think something that's tremendously significant through that and what has been commented on by many business organisations nationally is the inflexibility of the levy, the apprenticeship levy scheme, and the inability to actually spend that money on employing, paying for wages, particularly of new starters, young apprentices. And it's really disappointing. I'm sure Alison would agree to see that there's no mention of any overhaul of that apprenticeship levy scheme. I think it's tremendously disappointing.
Do you want me to comment?
I would say, Councillor Douglas, is that Councillor Waller is strongly advocating around the need for additional flexibilities within the apprenticeship levy. So that lobbying is taking place on behalf of the council via Councillor Waller.
Okay, thank you, Maxine. That's good to know. Did you have a further comment, Alison, or is that concluded that?
I was just going to say that when the ESFA is a fora that we are at, and we've got a very good relationship through the LEP, they hear firsthand, like at our York Business Week event in November, from employers and providers on that very issue. Equally, they were asking us to help shape some of the stuff that was going to come out in the white paper at a low level. But you're right, it's a shame that's not in there.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Kilbane's question.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Hi, Alison. Thanks for the report. It's the first time I've spoken, I think, which might be a record. And thanks to everybody for the reports tonight and the great work that you're doing. Can I just get a point of clarification on paragraph 21 on page 33, where you talk about rolling out a front-loading model? What do we mean by a front-loading model?
It's wonderful, isn't it? All that means is for certain sectors, and I think that they're starting with construction and possibly then care, and some of this does already happen, rather than an apprenticeship, say it's 5 days a week and 1 day a week being released at college to study for 20% off the job training. Front loading allows the employer to say, actually, can my apprentice go to college for like a block up front? So we front load that 20% off the job training. And then when they've got sort of the basics that I need to be able to use them on site and develop them further, they'll come and do some of the more practical piece. And it just allows that flexibility. So both the learners getting the skills they need in advance of going on site, and then the employer is getting them at the right time to be able to train them further and support what they need to do.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. Councillor Kilbane, did you have anything more, or?
I do. I've started now, so
Yes.
you're going to have
Yes,
trouble
you
shutting me
may
up.
continue.
Well, I saw that there's no other hands up, so I thought I could come in with my other question.
Yes.
I'm just curious, looking at the report. What's the scope for us leading as a council in terms of the direction of apprenticeships? So aligned with council priorities. So if you take, for example, the council ambition to be carbon neutral by 2030, that will take the conversion of something like 50,000 boilers to electric boilers. Well, we simply don't have the skills in the city to do that, hardly at all. I mean, we're struggling to take advantage of the green offers that are available at the moment. How much can we lead, through the apprenticeship system? How much can we try and encourage a market through working with the colleges, etc., to say we're going to start training these people because we're going to need them in the future, even though in a lot of cases the employers don't currently exist to employ them?
So not specifically just apprenticeships, but from a skills perspective, that is the role of the Skills and Employment Board and the skills strategy that we're working on, is to really ensure that we are putting the skills packages and programs in place to support where we need to be as a city. Directly linked to apprenticeships, in the apprenticeship levy transfer strategy for the council that was agreed, that aligned quite clearly to council priorities, including the green agenda. What I would then say around specifically your example of boilers, etc., is green skills is at the front of all of our conversations, but it's not just York, it's regional and national, really trying to understand what that means and how we make the most of that. What we are doing, and we have been doing for a while, is employment and skills plans in our capital programs. So when the council's looking to develop or refit some property, for instance, we will look at making the most from a skills and employment perspective, including apprenticeships. So there's definitely something there in the future around the green skills agenda and how that fits in. So these are conversations that are happening, and I know it's something that Councillor Waller is very keen on.
That's brilliant. Thank you for reassuring us about the green skills agenda, Alison. I don't see any more blue hands, but I'll just quickly ask my own question about clarification. You started, Alison, by saying that this year wouldn't likely be a recovery year for take-up of apprenticeships. But then I just wanted to pick up on something was mentioned in number 26 under risk management. It mentions that there may be an increased cohort looking for an apprenticeship this summer because of the amount of year 11s and year 13s who remained in education from September last year. And is that something that you think that we are ready for? Is there still likely to be an increase this summer, do you think?
I think it's that question of supply and demand. So I think from a demand side, there could be that increase with people looking for those apprenticeships. The question mark we have is around the wider economy in the market. We touched on it earlier. We don't know. We've tried to find out through working with employers and our network of providers how many apprentices are on furlough or had breaks in learning. And again, because of the issues around staff being on furlough themselves and businesses not operating, it's been very difficult to try and get any sense of what that looks like. What we do know is, as Simon mentioned, the number of people on furlough in those key and traditional apprenticeship recruitment sectors. So it could go either way. We're hoping that if the markets start to reopen and hospitality and tourism are allowed to reopen in the summer, then they could be quite resilient. The current apprenticeships might continue, and therefore we might see, a new opportunity to re-engage and get new apprenticeship starts for the cohort I mentioned. But actually, we just don't know. Whilst we're in lockdown, we don't have any influence on that market. So I didn't really answer your question.
No, that's okay. I know there are a lot of uncertainties. Okay, so and due to that and everything that's been said throughout this meeting about the importance of business engagement, I would like to support what Simon said earlier about there's still time to go for all the funding that we can do to make sure that there's enough raw resource provided externally, if need be, for that excellent business engagement work to continue. So I think we'll need to lead move on to something that Alison led us into very nicely, which is item 5, the updates and sort of introduction to the York Skills and Employment Board. So I think we're going to have perhaps an introduction from either the exec member who chairs the board and then a presentation from Alison. But correct me if one of you
well,
decides to
I'll do a little introduction. Just to clarify, the board is chaired by Lee Probert at York, from York College.
Forgive me, sorry about that.
Maxine and I. That's all right. So just to touch on some of the points previously raised that do link in with the skills board, because we're very conscious of the need to have progress. On the apprenticeship levy, I've written to the Minister asking for the flexibility that it does seem ludicrous to have funds that small businesses can't access. And the board, the skills board, met firstly on the 17th of December and then most recently last Friday. And the key has been to ensure the access to all available funding currently, as well as looking further ahead, which is why there's a 1-year, 2 to 5 year program and a longer term program. I was very heartened by the number of businesses that during the first lockdown were looking ahead, were taking the time to look at particularly the green skills agenda for sustainable construction. They were actually engaged with that, which I found very heartening and has been a driver on some of the work that I've been looking at the skills board addressing, bearing in mind that there is a need to develop courses by March if they're to be implemented in September. So I think it's a developing feature, but it does build on the great work that was done by officers during the first lockdown and onwards to improve engagement with businesses in the city. And the sectoral roundtables have enabled that contact to continue through the grants and other means of improving communication. But I think as a city, we've benefited from that immense amount of work by the council and partners to ensure that we are receiving those messages loud and clear. And it was very clear during York Business Week, the engagement that took place. So I think Alison has a presentation that she made to the Skills Board last Friday, which I think is very pertinent to this. So, Chair, I'd spoken with you earlier and you'd suggested that she delivered that because there are a number of key questions which would be pertinent to this audience as well. Thank you.
Lawrence, are you going to be sharing your screen, please? Thank you. And if we can move on to the next slide. Wonderful. So just to recap, and Councillor Waller mentioned it there, we're working on a 1-year plan to help people through change, and that picks up on the conversation earlier about it's those who need the help most and most imminently following the pandemic. That's the next 12 months, but what I would say is it's not a definitive start and end point. There will be things within that 12 months that we start running to lead us nicely into a 2 to 5 year horizon and with a longer term vision for 10 years. And that's a move from helping people through this change to having 21st century jobs. And as you can see, it's aligned with all the work on recovery and the economic growth strategy. With that in mind, what we're looking to do is to take the 1-year plan to Councillor Waller's decision session in March. So what I will take you through today, we have tight timescales for feedback. So I'll capture as much as I can today, but if you do have other comments, questions, post this session, please do just send them through to me. Ideally by the end of the week, but obviously my door's always open. Next slide, please. So I won't labour on this slide, but as you can see, there will be a structure to the document. The key pieces here are under how York is changing, recognising that we're in the pandemic, it's not over, it's a moving feast, as we've discussed today. We'll be setting the economic context, the impact on those subsections that you see there, particularly around post-16 education and training, and then the new world of work with key themes that you'll expect around digitalisation, remote working, and that green economy. So they are the challenges and the opportunities that this one-year plan will respond to. We go to the next slide, please. So how York is adapting. So this is our skills and employment response. It's important to caveat that the employment response isn't around us necessarily being able to create jobs. It's about us working to support people to develop the skills they need for employment and working with key partners like the Job Centre, and you've heard from Wendy today, around that wider employment need. And again, linking in and supporting the economic growth strategy. This has led us to develop 4 commitments, and you can see them there on your screen. I will go into the commitments one by one and give you an overview. What you also have are some questions under each commitment. I'm not proposing sharing them and talking through them on the slides today, but you do have them there, so that will hopefully stimulate the discussion. So if we move to the next slide, these 3 questions are the overarching questions that we presented on Friday to the Skills and Employment Board. So you can see they're phrased as such. But as I take you through, please keep in your mind whether you think they are the right commitments for that 12-month plan. Is there anything else that you're aware of that's happening that you think plays to those commitments and can really support delivery? And what are your expectations for us in the partnership? There is a lot of work that sits behind this, and that was detailed in the papers that were shared ahead of this session. We do have, we're not starting with a blank page. We're not saying, please tell us what you think at this stage. But we really want to see if there's things we've missed or understand if, hopefully our key issues align with your priorities too. So if we move on, thank you. The first commitment is all around York Works. So it's employment and skills for individuals. And particularly at this time, it's those that are entering, re-entering, or have been displaced from the workforce. How do we help them to retrain, upskill, and connect them with those job opportunities? And we think that forms 4 sub-actions, kind of headlines around careers, education, information, advice, and guidance. And this is all age. It needs to link to what's actually available in the labour market, the best we can in this changing world. We've already talked about equipment and digital skills, so this is a key focus, because actually this plan is around getting people to the best position we can, so that when we build on this with the 2 to 10 year strategy and indeed the inclusive growth strategy, they're in a strong position to benefit from that. We talked about helping residents to access skills packages and indeed the relevant funding to reskill and upskill. And then, of course, we need to promote what's already out there, particularly for those who are unemployed and facing redundancy. If we can move on, please. So commitment 2 is all around our skills support for businesses. And again, it's businesses of all sizes, and it's signposting them and helping them access that national, regional and local provision. And it's about supporting their planning, diversification and growth. We purposely haven't got startups and entrepreneurs under this commitment. You'll see that under commitment 4. But as you can see, it's about promoting all of that existing offer. It's about really making it easy for businesses to identify and access what they need, because we know that it's really complicated for a business to understand all of the support that's already out there, and sometimes to even understand their own needs in terms of skills. And then the important piece as well around giving them a sustainable voice in the development of the skills world. So not just the plan and the strategy, but actually shaping that provision. We can move on. Thank you. That brings us nicely on to pioneering provision, and this is the key focus around productive partnerships. We're already working in partnership to do our best on the ground and adapt and implement what we can. But actually it's also around developing employer-informed provision and new and innovative modes of delivery. So we know that you know, full-time or courses during the business day might not work for businesses or individuals. Bite-sized modular courses of what's being asked for. What are the particular skills and areas where this can be developed? So the immediate need for the 12 months will answer that. And then obviously embed the citywide partnership approach, which is the skills board. And then if we just move on to number 4, please. Education to employment. So this is all about the pipeline, but it's not just about the young people, although very much so about supporting those who've had a disrupted experience of education. But actually it's about those who are entering the new world of work, supporting that culture of lifelong learning, and people that want to maybe become a business owner and start their own business, how we support them. So again, it's about embedding those sustainable relationships between employers and providers. It's that promotion of that lifelong education, training and career pathway. And it's promoting the entrepreneurship support that's available to businesses, and not just startups, but also those wanting to scale up. So you can see there that some of those things will have activity that's discrete in 1 year, but a lot of that is about laying the foundations for the future. And on that note, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but you'll have had some slides up front that talk about the FE white paper that was published just over a week ago. The key takeaways there is that this plan and the work of the wider skills board aligns to actually what the government's looking for in terms of local skills improvement plans. And they're also looking for college business centres to be set up in partnership with people like the Chamber and businesses and colleges. So actually, when we discussed this on Friday, there was that view around the room that actually we are well placed in York to do what we need to do for the people in York, and wherever possible, maximise on that government funding, initiatives and opportunities. That's all I was going to present. But if you would like me to say any more, have questions.
Great, thank you, Alison. Okay, so I think we've just stopped sharing the screen so we can look back at everybody, and we've got those key questions in mind. Now, just before I ask members to ask their specific questions, I wondered whether I might ask, I think possibly Simon or even Tracy. I know you started, Alison, by saying it wasn't about us necessarily being able to create jobs, and I understand that in one sense, but I'd just like to echo what Councillor Taylor said at the very beginning of the meeting. You know, there is an urgent need for mass job creation, and we want government to respond to those really difficult areas of how we increase opportunities. But in terms of what we can do in York, and thinking specifically about York Central, I wondered if I could just ask when it might fit in to start, or when if you're already working on the kind of prospectus that we would see being provided by the enterprise zone of York Central, and if work is, I hope, was already on with targeting specific sustainable based green low carbon employers that are going to be the best employers for that site. Is that something that's underway? When might we see that kind of prospectus?
Okay, so there are two things that are published around that. We over a year ago now, so I think it was October 2019, we published our brief to the master developer of York Central. So of course that's Homes England and Network Rail and the Railway Museum, setting out what we hoped they would do to use the employment space that's been allocated on York Central in terms of sectors and in terms of sizes of businesses, and also in terms of as you say, in terms of the green agenda as well. So that's been out there for some time, and that recognised kind of how those jobs would need to fit into the York economy, the kind of scale of business that we're talking about, and also the importance of having high-end niche businesses that are really going to provide really good employment. And then just before Christmas, at Councillor Waller's decision session, we put out our a paper around inward investment, which again touched on many of the same aspects, looking at particularly which sectors we want to focus on, and setting out the process that we now need to go through. There's more work around inward investment at the moment, and you'll see in the paper that's about to come out around the future of Make It York, our thoughts around inward investment and around the scale of the challenge there. What I'd say is that the things that have probably changed. So the starting point is we've set out our initial plans and our initial thoughts around this, and we're trying to map a gross number of jobs into something which is far more specific. And in the inward investment paper, we talked about the next stages really being about doing, what you've just touched on there, Councillor Baker, in terms of identifying clear target businesses we want to work with. As it stands, that is a challenge for Make It York to respond to. But we are, as I say, looking at the balance of where that inward investment work takes place between ourselves and our company, Make It York. What's changed over the pandemic is, well, some of it is unknowns. That's around the kind of scale of use of office space. So if you have an office for 100 people, how many people actually work from it? Is it 100? Is it 200? Is it 300? And what does that mean in terms of the demand for particularly for office space, but also for other kind of workspace too? And alongside that, the LEP has now put forward its devolution asked to government around particularly from an economic point of view, and you'll see in there's a really big strand on the Bio Yorkshire initiative that the university are leading, which is very much around that creation and development of the green economy in York. So there are some moving pieces around the back of those two papers that we've already published, but I say we're getting a much clearer definition than we've ever had in terms of the kind of jobs that we would like to see coming to York, the kind of companies. We are working closely with the university and other partners about what's needed in terms of workspace. The challenge remains with York Central that while we can do our best to influence what happens there, we are not the owners and developers of that site, but it's good to see, as the initial contracts are being let for the enabling works that are happening there, strong commitments in there around, particularly around, for instance, apprenticeships and how we use that as a way to develop job opportunities. So expect to see more on this over the coming months, and it will be a strong theme in our economic strategy work, which there will be lots of opportunities for all of you to feed your views and experiences into. The inward investment planning again happens along in a similar timescale to that, and we are approaching the point where it's worthwhile targeting businesses to talk about them coming to York Central, because the space is now just about developable, but it's one of those chicken and egg situations where you have to bring businesses to space that they can actually develop, and it took making sure that we got the necessary permissions through in terms of the enabling works for York Central, really to get to the position where we're within a couple of years of potentially space opening, and then you can really work with businesses to persuade them to come to it. So we are coming to just finessing those issues at the moment, and it's a very good time to be asking that question, and an interesting time to be thinking about the future of our economy and the kind of businesses that we want to bring here. So as I say, work is very much heading in that direction at the moment, and over the next few months you'll see a lot more around it, and there'll be lots of opportunities for all of you to get involved in the nitty-gritty of exactly who we're wanting to come to exactly what space.
If I can just add to that, that yes, the York please. Central development, we are working closely with central government at the moment about the development of a potential government hub on the site, which would form a really nice kernel of a kind of a central occupier that would kickstart the development there. Obviously, we've been waiting many years to be in a position where we have the planning permissions in place and the funding packages in place to be able to commence that work. And I think it's really important that we're, in this really difficult time, able to actually be evidencing our capacity to start work there, and therefore have those detailed conversations about really landing some inward investment into the city. And we're quite excited at that prospect.
Excellent. Thank you very much. There's lots to look up there. Great answers to my question. So moving on to the other people that have questions. Councillor Taylor.
And again, first, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alison, for the report, and also Simon and Tracy for those additional contributions, which are warm words to my heart. There is just one omission as I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alison, but there seems to be no mention whatsoever of heritage skills. There is a national, if not an international, dearth of people with the requisite skills to maintain and restore ancient buildings. Councillor Waller and I have spoken briefly about this recently. I don't know whether he wants to chip in on the matter. But this is a sector of the economy in which York has been preeminent in the past. But of course, many of the leading lights are aging, retiring, and one has recently passed away. I'm very much all for 21st century jobs, but additionally, York can benefit from a focus on 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century job skills. This is an opportunity. There is a gap in the market for these skills. Woodworking, stonemasonry, stained glass, ornate plasterwork. We're not talking jobs in number, obviously. Can we just hear then whether the sector has been overlooked, and if not, can it have some more prominence or at least some visibility in the strategy plan?
Absolutely. Please be reassured it hasn't been overlooked. What we are doing and have been doing to underpin elements of the one-year plan, but predominantly that 2 to 10 year vision, is building an evidence base where we actually then understand more about the key sectors in the city. And when I say key sectors, there's a short list of 16 based on the sectors discussed through economic strategy work and predicated on the round table discussions all over the summer. We're building on what we learned from there, and we actually have an external, jointly funded through the partnership, a consultant working to actually build sector reports, sector summaries for each of those sectors, and heritage is most certainly one of those. They're in a good state, but they're not complete. We know there's more work to do, actually talking to some of the workforce development groups and key people in those sectors. And what I would also say is, whilst we talk about 21st century jobs, we're not just talking AI. We're talking about the way in which jobs actually take place. So flexible working, remote locations for some roles, but actually it could be the use of a technology in a particular trade. For instance, I know in terms of kind of stone cutting and certain technologies that you need to use to support that. And I think there's a niche in our region outside of York that can do that. So absolutely take your point, and we're not necessarily, well, we wouldn't be advocating throwing away those skills that York's known for.
Thank you. I feel reassured. Sorry, Andrew.
Comment on that point. Yes, there was a discussion at the skills board on Friday specifically about that issue, because the experiences of people, as you say, we need to ensure that those skills are passed down, and that there's the opportunity to keep that something that York is associated with. That there are always new technologies applied, greater understanding, and therefore, in order for the unique selling point of York competing against other cities, ensuring that there's investment and ensuring that, as Alison explained, conversations with those organisations to make sure that they can keep going, and that the strategic and targeted support, and we'll certainly make the case. But it's something close to my heart as well, Councillor.
Thank you for the question. Great. And Councillor Douglas next. please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few things that I just wanted to raise. Something that the Local Enterprise Partnership did quite a lot of work on in 2019 was around the anchor institution role of our largest employers in the city, supporting and helping smaller businesses to up their ability to deliver on the skills and many other aspects of their business, the skills agenda. And I notice that that's not really mentioned in the document. It's quite specific, but I think that's really important. And of course, we shouldn't forget that the City of York Council is an anchor institution in our city and should be acting as an exemplar of how we can help our local city to improve employment opportunities and do as much as we can there. I also noticed in the report that it talks about the Skills and Employment Board feeding back to the City Leaders Board and telling them about what's going on, but something that we know we must do more of is ask employers what they want to see in the skills agenda. And so I wondered if we could make sure that City Leaders Board has a chance to input what they think needs to be in the skills agenda. So that was another one. And then finally, something that I think is going to be really important for York is, as mentioned, the lifelong learning agenda. Where we know that our employment is going to be most challenged is in our large employment sectors, retail, hospitality, etc. And we also know that those people are going to need to find jobs quite likely elsewhere, and quite often they need to improve their educational attainment and some quite basic qualifications. And the ability for many people to access that is really very limited financially, childcare wise, etc., etc. I really think we need to make that a high priority if we're going to see York ride this very challenging time out. Thank you.
Do you want me to comment back on that?
Yes, please do, Alison.
But taking them in order, so anchor institution, absolutely, and you'll see that key partners on that Skills Employment Board are just that, not exclusively, but we have both universities and both colleges there. So again, in that longer term strategy, that's very much something they see themselves as those placemakers. So it's not just, it's broader, it's not just about them trying to be commercial, it's actually about what they can do and what difference they can make to the York and actually slightly wider economy. In terms of the Skills and Employment Board, absolutely. I have presented at the Business Leaders Group once already, and it will be on the agenda at next Monday's session as well. But you're right, it's about that two-way conversation. And what I didn't mention was the consultant that's been working on building that evidence base has also been working with University of York student teams to actually do some additional direct business engagement on the emerging plans. But this is very much the start of it, and come the spring, summer, in line with the economic growth strategy, consultation and engagement, we will look to reach as many people as we can.
Can I just come in on that as well?
Yeah, please.
I'd say, to me, one of the most heartening things about the Skills Board is the involvement of employers in it at the moment as well. So we have, for instance, the HR director from Simpsons, a construction company, giving really useful input. On Friday, we've got on behalf of the Federation of Small Businesses, we've got a small SME employment agencies giving great input as well. We have the Chamber feeding back on a lot of the engagement that they do as well. So we're already having that sense of that of being employer driven in terms of what we're doing, and the engagement that we've been doing and that we've touched on several times this evening already throughout the COVID is also something that we're now beginning to work with those networks that we've been able to establish to test essentially what's in the strategy. And those questions that Alison's asked you this evening are questions that are going to go out to all of those businesses that we're in touch with as well. So we're actually, I mean, it's always impossible to take every single point of view on board,
but we're working really hard to make sure that this is genuinely engagement. It's not about the council writes a plan and then asks 3 business leaders to say it's a good plan, and then we say the business sector supports it. This is genuinely something we want to co-produce with industry. We know that if it's going to mean anything to the residents of York and the people who live in your ward, it's got to respond to the real jobs out there, and not just some notion that we have about what jobs ought to be like. So, you know, these are all very much central to our approach in terms of developing the skills plan and indeed the economic strategy more generally. We've got good engagement already, but you know, we're constantly looking to see how we can do it even better.
Thanks, Chair, and I can just concur with that. And we are making sure that as many voices are heard as possible, recognising that many businesses, particularly small businesses at the moment, their focus is on survival, response to Brexit, COVID, and therefore ensuring that wherever they contact the council, whether it's through the weekly bulletin that we send out to businesses, or if they're members of FSB or the chamber or whatever, that the opportunity to capture their ambition for skills and training in the future, and any recognition of new courses that are needed, that's captured. So we're conscious we don't want to overload businesses, but we do want to make sure that their voices are heard.
Thank you very much.
Just
Alison,
a final piece
yes.
on lifelong learning. Absolutely, it's embedded within that 1-year plan, and will be that longer term culture piece. Good conversations with partners across the board, and obviously particularly York Learning, as you'd expect. I don't know if you want to come in, Angela.
Yes, so we work tirelessly really to make sure we engage with those with the lowest skills, to enable them to build up their skill level so that they can then move on into York College or any college or university or whatever. And some choose not to, but that doesn't mean that they're not moving forward in specific vocational skills instead within a workplace and employment place. One of the things that we thought we could contribute towards this is that we'll help work with the colleges and the university to provide those stepping stones that will help work out how you could get from very low English, for example, onto a degree level course. And I think that's where we can help support the whole programme.
Can I just add again on that? So, you know, we've touched on what does 21st century jobs mean, and you know, it's not just around doing wacky things with robots. It's around recognising that work in the 21st century, particularly in York, is different from perhaps how it was in the 20th century. We know that York has a very, very high level of employment, and that means that there are a lot of people in York, particularly who are working part-time. We've already touched earlier on how that a lot of that work is essential. It has to be in retail and hospitality, because that's where the part-time work is. But we know that there are a lot of people underemployed in those sectors who could actually be doing. They want part-time work because they've got other responsibilities in life. But actually, if there was part-time work in science and technology, they would be keen to do it. And there's an element of lifelong learning, which is around refreshing people's skills and making sure that they're up to date, and also helping people not just get in at the bottom of the jobs ladder, but move across into work which is far more appropriate. And you're absolutely right to highlight the almost complete lack of funding and opportunity that there is around lifelong learning at the moment. And we would see that as being absolutely fundamental to the concept of the 21st century job. Is around it being flexible, around it being there being opportunities that recognise that 25 hours a week doesn't mean that you're a part-timer and no use. Actually, it means it's the difference between that and 37 hours is not a lot, but the structure of our employment is not very well set up at the moment. So there's a lot of kind of structural stuff underneath some of these phrases that we use that are actually all about lifelong learning and finding opportunities for people to have even better employment than they have at the moment.
Thank you. I'm going to move on. We've got 4 new questions, I'm afraid. Sorry, Councillor Douglas, and we really do want to finish as close to 7:30 as possible. Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Chair. Just quick ones for for Alison in terms of sort of things missing, and it's probably not missing, but I didn't pick it up from the slides. There was mention made of support for businesses in terms of guiding businesses through the variety of local, regional, and national funding and support that's available. Is part of that supporting sort of business to business support and mentoring, and trying to, rather than have it as or appear as a very much a kind of one way sort of thread, to actually support business to support one another, particularly in certain sectors. I just wanted to flag that up. Thank you.
No, I do take your point, and I think we need to go away and think about that one, because we do have Simon's team in particular is working on a wider business support strategy, and sometimes it's a fine line or a bit of a grey area where skills start and end, because obviously it's interlinked. So we will think about that and where that best sits to reflect definitely that kind of network support and peer-to-peer.
Thank you. Councillor Webb was next with his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. My question is quite a specific one on one of the annexes. Bottom of page 64, which is one of the Annex A's, on industry placements, T levels. So T levels are a thing that were meant to be sort of linked to A levels, sort of a similar sort of idea for colleges. And it says here that money has been secured for the rollout of that programme, and York College was selected to deliver that from September 2020. Could you just sort of update us as to where we are with that? I don't know if it's been delayed or has been rolled out, but obviously with what's going on at the moment in colleges, probably not. I don't know. Could we say where we're going to be in September 2021, for example?
Maxine, can I bring you in? Because I've not heard any different to that.
Yeah, obviously, as you know, Councillor Webb, the college delivery of certain of its courses has been delayed. So the bit that's the T levels that is quite delayed at the moment is the work elements of those. But the planning around the delivery of T levels is taking place at the college, and they have it on their books as being something that is part of their provision. But it is about the fact that at the moment it's not going quite as well as it should because of the lack of the face-to-face delivery taking place.
And so on that note, does that then mean that in September 21, when you've got to put together work placements and things like that for these students, are we making young people aware that it's unlikely to go ahead into 2021? If there's less jobs, for example, there's less likelihood that people are going to take them on. Are we making that clear to young people?
I think the whole aspect of work placement at the moment is one of the things that we're beginning to focus on through the partnership, through the skills partnership, because obviously it's really important that we're starting to signal where those opportunities may be of getting those employability skills. So a lot of thought at the moment is being put in across the partnership about how we can actually get some recovery work happening around work placement.
Thank you very much, Maxine. We have two more questions at the moment coming from Councillor Kilbane, first of all, please.
Oh, thanks, Chair. And thanks for the report. I mean, it all looks great, all looks good. My concern is that these things can quite easily become talking shops. So what are we going to put in place to make sure that doesn't happen? So in other words, how is its success going to be measured? If you like, in terms of what its objectives are. Also, for Councillor Waller, whether or not he thinks that cross-party representation on the council part of the skills board would help. And finally, the thing that's kind of missing to me in all of this is who is it that's actually going to go out there and get that inward investment? Who is it that's going to go out there and persuade those 21st century industry employers to come to York? You know, who's going to actually do the work? I know that's maybe not the remit of the board, but it would be something that board would want to have some oversight or control over. To me, we need to be a little, given that we're looking at 8,500 jobs going, with or 10,000 jobs if you believe newspaper reports from during the week. We need to be a lot more proactive than that. So who's going to go out there and get the jobs? And if needs be, does the council need to set something up to get the ball rolling?
I answer that second question first. And that's exactly what the paper that went to Councillor Wall's decision session around inward investment was about, a recognition that actually the time is right for the council to do far more on inward investment. And that's part of the work that we're doing at the moment around trying to bring together the somewhat dispersed resources we have between ourselves and Make It York, and give them a new renewed focus on bringing new jobs into York. So the council's job is to lead on that. That's very, very clear in what we've said so far. What that needs is to bring some resource to do that, because it's all very well to say it's our responsibility, but you actually need somebody to pick that up and go with it. So we are on the case with that at the moment in terms of trying to bring that resource together, and we are clear that actually we need to lead on it. We also need to work with York and North Yorkshire LEP, who are now responsible for our patch, who would also recognise that they need to up their game in terms of inward investment as well, and that York needs to be at the heart of that. So it's a joint discussion really in terms of how we bring all those different resources together, how we make sure that we're working as effectively as we can with all of those other bodies and agencies out there who work on inward investment, but also how we get York's distinctive offer direct to market as well. So I say live discussion. Paper went to Councillor Waller in October, I think it was, perhaps it was November, and we are ongoing at the moment in terms of trying to finesse those the final bits of bringing that team together to get working as soon as possible.
Thank you, Simon. Just to support Councillor Kilbane, I would also welcome any additions to the in terms of cross-party membership of the board. I think that's something that could be looked at. And I'm going to go to Councillor Cullick with your question.
Thank you. I'm not sure this is so much of a question as a comment. Firstly, just to explain, many might be surprised to see me joining this meeting this evening. I'm substituting for Councillor Daubney, not because he cannot be here, but because he's a member of both of the scrutiny committees that are meeting jointly this evening. And I was asked to substitute in order to maintain that proportionality. So thank you for allowing me to be part of the conversation this evening, and I found it absolutely fascinating and informative. The one point that I want to make is that in our post-pandemic world, as we talk about the world of work in the future, and just beginning to get some sense of just how different that might be, what I notice is how in this new world order, as it were, the relationship between place in terms of employment and residence has become so much more fractured. Whereas in the past we would define things in terms of distances that one could commute, traveling, networks, affordability, and distances, that is just so a thing of the past. And I'll illustrate that with one very simple comment, and that is I was talking very recently with someone who's moved to York just in the last few weeks, and he's moved to York from Hong Kong. I said, is it work that's brought you here? Is it? Well, of course, we're all aware of the situation in Hong Kong. He said, no, not for a moment. He said, no, I'm still working in Hong Kong. I'm still working for my company in Hong Kong. I am now working for that company. I just happen to be working from York, which is a wonderful place to be. And I think we've only just begun to grasp how different this world is, and the relationship between place when it comes to employment and residence will be very, very different. I just wanted to throw that into our thinking before we come to a conclusion this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cullick. Councillor Douglas, I know you've been waving at me. So to come to a conclusion, is there another comment you'd like to make rather than a new question?
It's a follow-up to a previous. It's a follow-up to a previous comment.
Okay, well, go ahead and then we'll wrap up.
It's just to say that on the cross-party involvement in the Skills and Employment Board, that I actually did ask if I could be on that, and the administration decided that they didn't want cross-party involvement, which is a real shame, I think, as I concur with councillors that have raised that it's really helpful.
Okay, thank you. Now we can finish up by, I would say, requesting that the updates from this board, from the Skills and Employment Board, do stay on our agenda. And obviously we're a joint committee here tonight, so I think it would be probably best to make a recommendation back to the CSMC committee, who do the sort of planning of the different items that come to the different committees, that we very much want an update again from the Skills and Employment Board, please, at an appropriate time. And as Alison said earlier, any other comments on reflection, or once you've looked through all the slides she sent and thought about the questions to send to her this week, would be really helpful in the formation of the 1-year strategy initially. So I'd like to thank everyone for their time. I didn't manage to say thank you to Wendy, who was on the phone earlier. And Councillor Webb, did you want to comment on what I just said?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I'd just like to add a recommendation, really. Maybe this could just come back to the children's part of this committee, which sounds very demeaning when we say it like that, but you know what I mean, about T-levels, because I do think with the rollout of this programme, but then with the shrink back of the business offer, I really think we could end up with some children that could end up in a slightly dodgy place come September if we don't get this right. So I think it would be great if that could potentially just go back. If we could recommend that comes to the Children's Scrutiny Committee, that'd be very helpful. And
so Councillor Webb, just to clarify, you would like an update on T-levels for the scrutiny? Yeah.
Yes, please, Maxine.
Yeah.
And I also think that we should recommend the excellent work of council officers who are supporting young people, getting into the right place, getting into the right position. I think we should do all we can to support that as councillors, and I hope that the administration can support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Thank you to all the members that have asked very interesting questions tonight, and to our wonderful officers that have been supporting all of the work. And we look forward to seeing the 1 year and then in time the 10-year strategy for skills and employment and recovery for the economy in this city. So good night, everybody, and thanks very much for your time.